Hey there, I'm Marie from DIY Montreal, and today we're going to upgrade the miter saw station by adding some storage underneath. Now, I built this miter saw station just over a year ago, and I have a video and plans available if you're interested. Now, I did two upgrades ever since that video, the first being dust collection, where I added this dust hood with sliding doors, and it added a dust cyclone underneath, and the second video was I added a bank of drawers for storage. Now, in the original design, I made the miter saw station out of 2x4 lumber and left the undersides open on purpose so I could come back later and add storage to fit my needs. So, without further ado, let's get started.
The first thing I want to do is hide these utilities by adding a set of doors. I built these shaker doors in my last video if you want to check that out. I'm using Blum half overlay hinges that can be installed with a 35mm bit, but using a jig like this definitely helps. I align the jig with the edge of the door in order to set the hinge 4 inches from the bottom. If you're interested in the jig or these hinges, I'll leave links down in the description below. I repeated the same process for the second hinge, then followed the instructions on the packaging in order to install the mounting clips in the right spot. Hinges are always a bit different, but these ones you just slide into the clips, then secure by tightening the back screw. I mounted the other door using the same process, then was about to start adjusting the doors when I noticed that I had made the doors too big. Since I hadn't yet applied finish, I could just take them over to the table saw and trim the inside edge off both doors. I reinstalled them to test the fit, then simply adjusted the 2 screws on each hinge until the doors were both straight and level. Next up is an idea inspired by my kitchen, a pull-out garbage bin. I need to build a holder that I'll attach to some drawer slides, so I first measured my garbage. Oh, and by the way, to get the diameter, you simply need to divide the circumference by pi. I cut a piece of MDF wide enough to cover the garbage and deep enough to fit my drawer slides. To trace out the circle for the cut, I first found the center point and made a pilot hole. I used a scrap thin piece of wood to drill 2 pilot holes to match the radius of my garbage, which is equal to half the diameter. I could then simply nail it into my center hole and use a pencil in the other hole to trace the circle. To cut out the circle, I first drilled a large pilot hole so I could insert my jigsaw, and then make the cut. You'll notice I used a mix of MDF and plywood in this build, and there's no particular reason for that, other than those are the offcuts I happen to have on hand. With my circle cut, I could do a test fit and was happy to see I got my math right. Next, I need to build a sort of base to hold the cutout. The base will just be 4 pieces of plywood assembled into a box. I'm making the sides tall enough to install drawer slides and also to have a decent sized surface to attach my door panel later on. I used my pocket hole jig to make pocket holes in the front and back pieces, then applied some glue and assembled the box using pocket screws. You'll notice the back piece is shorter than the other pieces, but there's really no reason for that other than I couldn't find a bigger offcut. It shouldn't affect the overall structure, and it'll be hidden in the back. With that done, I can simply apply some glue and secure the cutout panel to the top with some brad nails. Before installing the drawer slides, I'll need to modify the base of my miter station. But wait, first I double-checked the width of the trash holder, then added 1 inch to account for the width of the slides, and cut a scrap piece to that length so I could use it to position the back leg. I then secured it with some pocket screws. I used the same spacer to position the front leg, then added pieces on the right and left at the same height as I planned to install the drawer slides. Okay, with my opening ready, I can now install the slides. I cut out a spacer block for this to ensure that both sides would be at the exact same height. Using these drawer slide jigs, I simply dropped in the slide and set it 1/8 of an inch back from the opening. Then, holding it in place, I gently pulled out the slide and found the holes to install 3 screws and secured it in place. I repeated the same process on the opposite side, then used my drawer slide jig to support the trash holder while I pulled out the slides and secured them, this time making the slide flush with the front of the box. I started with the front screws and alternated sides, then could pull out the box a little more to reveal the next screw hole, and so on until I reached the back. I did a test fit and everything looked good, but I still need to add a door. But we'll get back to that in a bit. I still have a tiny little nook that I'm going to use as tool storage by adding a vertical pull-out wall. I got this idea from Jackman Works, and I'll leave a link to his video down below. I don't really have any way to clamp the jig down, so instead I'll make a homemade jig. I managed to get a first nail in, then holding it level, I drove in a few more nails. Just as before, I set the slide back 1/8 of an inch and held it in place with one hand as I pulled it out with the other hand so I could install the screws. For the bottom rail, I stacked and leveled a bunch of offcuts to support the slide while I screwed it in. Before installing the panel, I decided I should add a false front so I'll have something to attach the door to. So I simply screwed on another piece of MDF. With that done, I could mount the panel to the slides. I used some shims to level and support the panel, then pulled out the slides and secured them with screws. Alright, it's time to dress up this tool wall, starting with a simple storage solution for my saw blades. After a quick layout, I drilled a hole to insert a 1/2 inch dowel with a little glue. Once dried, I could hang my blades using some homemade spacers that I made from thin plywood. Next, I screwed in 2 dowels from the back to hold my brad nailer, and made a simple holder for my jigsaw that I also screwed in from the back. Last but not least, I made a small holder for my sander and added a hook for the cord. It's time to add the doors, and if you're interested, I have a full video on building shaker doors, and you'll find a link down in the description below. For the door to the garbage, I'm adding this backer so I'll have something to screw into when installing it. I won't lie, going with shaker doors probably wasn't the best idea. Mounting them is going to be a challenge since I can't really get a clamp on here. I pre-drilled some pilot holes, then decided to try some double-sided tape to try to temporarily stick on the door while I screw it in from behind. I used a level as a straight edge that I shimmed up against the bottom of the adjacent doors. I then used a spacer to get the door into position. Reaching in from behind, I pressed up against the tape and delicately pulled out the door. You can see me awkwardly holding it, trying to get a screw in from behind. It wasn't pretty, but ultimately it worked. I could then add some more screws, trying to get them into the door frame. To install the door for the pull-out wall, I first drilled some pilot holes and put in the screws. That being said, I figured it would be easier to use the doorknob to help install the door, so I started with that. Using the same trick as before, I positioned the door, then used the knob hole to drill through the backer. I could then temporarily install the knob and hold the door in place. After that, it was just a matter of leveling the door and screwing it in from behind. To finish things off, I installed the dryer pull for the garbage and installed the rest of the knobs. Hey, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I'd love to have you, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Until next time, thanks for watching. See you soon.